What's up guys, welcome to Talking Poodoo, a Star Wars show. Today I'm reviewing Thrawn Treason by Timothy Zahn. This is the third in what is, I suppose, the new Thrawn trilogy. And it's set during the events of Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels, where Thrawn is called away to deal with a Grollock situation that's affecting Director Krennic and the building of the Death Star. It plays out a bit like a murder mystery, where he's going there, he finds out there's a problem, but then, of course, it's Thrawn. He's very intelligent. He's almost like a Sherlock Holmes. He's like 2 steps ahead of everyone else. He knows there's a bit more to it than that. And then it kind of leads off from there, where he's finding clues that goes from one place to the other, where he gets this big unraveling mystery ahead of him. And it does feel like a side story. It doesn't entirely feel necessary. So that's probably the biggest negative I've got about this. But I liked it a lot. This is a really good book. And I enjoyed it. It's very fun. There's great action scenes in there towards the end. The murder mystery kept me hooked. It was very interesting. The interactions between Thrawn and Krennic and Tarkin were really interesting as well, to see them characters play out. Thrawn at this point is just flat out one of the best Star Wars characters ever made. So to see him in the lead role again is just fascinating. We don't find out too much new about him this book. This book really dives into some of the side characters a bit more rather than him, and he's kind of there as someone they're looking up to and monitoring, and you're seeing him from their perspective primarily. So one of the things I like that is that while this does feel like a side story, it feels like they're hinting and building towards something bigger, perhaps happening in the future. We don't know yet where this is going, but I suppose this was hinted at in the last book as well, and it's building on that. But there's this whole thing with the Grisk, where they're invading the Empire, and they're a threat to the Empire. How big a threat are they going to be? How significant are they going to be? We don't know this yet. I'm hoping it's going to be something significant. Hopefully this is going to be something that the expanded universe can really dive into and look into as well, because I want more expanded universe content that isn't focusing on characters from the original trilogy and characters from what we know of Star Wars so far. I want something away from the Rebels and the Empire, something different, and I think like this could very well be it. Will they go in that direction? I don't know. I could totally see them doing that, but at the same time I could totally see it being disappointing and just being like, yeah, that's dealt with, let's not bother with that again. So hopefully they do delve into that, because that's really interesting. So one of the big things about Thrawn, if you've ever read a Thrawn book before, is that he is able to deduce things based on art. So if there's an enemy out there, he needs to try and figure out what that enemy is going to do next. So he looks at a piece of art from that enemy's culture, and that's how he figures it out. I've never been that keen on this element of him. Yeah, it's cool and quirky, but it's also like a little far-fetched. So it does dive into that quite a bit here. It even goes it's going into spoilers, but looking at just paintings and sculptures and so on isn't the only art form that he can do this with. So yeah, it's far-fetched, it's a little iffy at times, but it's just one of them things where it's part of his character. You've just got to go with it, and again, it's a fantasy at the end of the day. So yeah, just overlook that bit. So in the first of this new trilogy of Thrawn books, there was a character called Eli Vanto, who, really fascinating character, one of the main characters of that first book, who was essentially the keep our eyes into this new version of Thrawn. But he wasn't in the last book. We know where he went to join the Chiss Ascendancy, but he's back this time, and it's really good to have him back, to get a new perspective on things, and how and why he's been working with the Chiss, and also how new characters, or characters who are in the Empire, look at him as well, because to the Empire, he's a traitor. They don't know where he's went or why he's went there. So when he suddenly shows back, it's like, oh, you're that guy who betrayed us all, we can't trust you. So it's really interesting diving into that, and to really get an idea of who is Eli Vanto really working for. And it does this with Thrawn as well. Is he working for the Empire? Is he working with the Chiss? And it really dives into allegiances and the greater good and so on. So one of the new characters here is a character called Ronan, who's the assistant director to director Orson Krennic from Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. This is a great character who is a pain in the backside and a nuisance. intentionally so. And Timothy Zahn has done a really good job at making this character constantly just button heads with everyone who feels like he deserves all the answers, and despite the fact that he's a civilian, he's really trying to get some sort of authority in there. And it's really interesting how he's just constantly at odds with everyone else, how he's like really unwanted and a bit of a nuisance and a bit annoying to everyone else. And in the end of the day, he ends up being a character who you just love to hate. And hopefully we'll see more of him in the future as well, because he is interesting. So one of the big things this does is it really explores the Chiss in a bit more detail. There are way more Chiss characters in this than the past two books. So you see how their military works, how their operations much more like working in a submarine as opposed to on a battleship. And you get little hints here that the Chiss have some sort of force power-ish abilities. Not going into spoilers there. Again, some of this was introduced in the last book, but essentially the female characters, when they're young, they are able to navigate through space using some sort of like telekinetic ability. A lot of the Chiss stuff though feels really surface level stuff. It feels like there's way more to delve into, way more to dig into, and it hasn't really happened in this book yet. So hopefully we'll get some more of that in the future, because the Chiss seem to be a big important species, and if this new Grisk threat is going to be something significant, then the Chiss are probably going to be significant too. So I hope we really do dive into them a lot more in future books or comics or whatever. At the same time, we get a bit more insight into the Empire and its hierarchy. We see how, for example, Ronan, who is a civilian in an authority role, interacts with the military and their authority, how there are overlaps. And then you've also got the Secret Service side of things, whose name I'm forgetting off the top of my head right now. But they're all working together, but then they're not really together. So it's really interesting how it dives into that, and how a Grand Admiral might have authority over one person, but that person doesn't technically work for the military, so it doesn't work for them. So yeah, it's good how it looks into that stuff as well, and how it isn't just the Empire rules everything. Last thing I want to talk about with characters is the character of Commodore Thrawn. So Commodore Thrawn in the second book kind of replaced the Eli Vanto character. She was our insight into this universe, our insight into Thrawn, and it continues doing that in this book. And she's very much one of the main characters here. So she's very likable, very relatable, but the problem that I have with her character is we don't ever really find out anything about her. All we do is see things from her perspective, but I couldn't tell you what her backstory is, I couldn't tell you what she likes or dislikes. She's a bit of a blank slate, and I think that's because we're meant to be putting ourselves in her shoes kind of thing and filling in the gaps there. So I get that, but it would be a bit nice if we had a bit more information about her. And in many ways, she's a bit of a replacement for Captain Pillion, who was from the original Thrawn trilogy, who also is in this book. Not much to say about him though, he's only there like a blink and you'll miss it kind of thing. But he's there. And that's what I thought about Thrawn Treason without going into spoilers. I am going to go into spoilers in just a second. If you haven't read this book, go read the book, come back, watch the rest of this. And if you are going to leave, you can subscribe to my channel now. I'd really appreciate that. The more subscribers I get, the more content I'll be able to make. So also go on to Twitter and Instagram and give me a follow at _Grant Burton. And leave any comments and feedback down below as well. But until next time, thanks for watching so far, but now it's time to go into full spoilers for Thrawn Treason. So because this plays out like a mystery novel and there are clues sprinkled here and there throughout the book, one of the things you're trying to work out is who the villain is, and I was a little surprised by who the villain is. It does a good job of revealing the villain, it does a good job of building up to it. It's not like a sudden, oh, that guy's the villain kind of thing. It's like, every now and then there's a little clue that reveals a bit more, and then eventually it's like, yeah, it has to be this person. So I really like that. And the villain, by the way, is Grand Admiral Savitt. And towards the end of the book, it becomes a big battle scene between the Star Destroyer and the Chiss and the other Star Destroyer. And it's really cool to see how Thrawn has fought so much ahead, and he's just outmaneuvering Savitt at every opportunity. It brought a smile on my face to see how he essentially used all his techniques and abilities to have this battle where nobody died. And really impressive stuff, really smart. It looks like Timothy Zahn has planned this out really well in advance and pretty darn good. And it was just really great just to see Savitt get so frustrated and annoyed at everything because no matter what he'd done, Thrawn had an answer to it. So I talked about how it feels like a bit of a side story. That's kind of the only negative I have about this. Hopefully this is building up to something that's going to be a bit more significant, a bit more not about the rebels versus the Empire. Hopefully that this grist threat is going to establish maybe a new Thrawn trilogy. Who knows? But the only other thing I want to touch on is that towards the middle of the book it slows down a little bit when Eli Vanto and Ronan and a couple of Death Troopers go down to a planet to continue their investigation. I do think it slows down a bit there. I don't think it's entirely necessary that we spend so much time down there with them, but it does make sense towards the end. And yeah, that's literally the only negatives I've got about this. It is a small book. It's not the biggest book ever in terms of how grand and adventurous this story is, but it is enjoyable. It's well written. I like the characters a lot, and I do recommend it. So yeah, thanks for watching this so far, and until next time, of course, subscribe to my channel, Twitter and Instagram, yada yada yada, you know the drill. Thanks for watching.